The list is taped to the wall beside the basement door. 11 names. 7 days cut into hours. Somebody has written theirs in pencil. Tuesday, 8 to 9. It is Tuesday. It is 5 to 8. The woman from the third floor comes down with a towel over one arm and a small folded cloth in her hand. She does not knock. There is nobody to knock for. She turns the handle and the heat comes out to meet her. You already know this country. You know it as the quiet one, the one where people stand an arm's length apart at the bus stop, and further if the stop is empty. Where a stranger on a half-full tram walks past 4 free seats to sit alone. Where a silence in a conversation is not a gap to be filled. It is the normal state of the room. All of that is true, every part of it. There are also 3.3 million saunas here, in a country of 5.5 million people. Almost 9 in 10 adults use one at least once a week. A great many use one 4 or 5 times. And most of those rooms are shared, with neighbors, with colleagues, with whoever booked the hour after yours. The same man who moved down the carriage to avoid sitting near you will sit beside you tonight, naked, on a wooden bench, in 90 degrees of heat. Neither of you will find it strange. Neither of you will speak unless there is something worth saying. There is a sauna in this country's capital that nobody owns. Nobody locks it. Nobody is paid to look after it. It has been pulled apart and burned, and it has been built again. Why it still works is the last thing this film will tell you. So the question is not why Finns are cold. They are not. The question is why the most privacy-guarding people in Europe put their whole social life inside the one room where privacy is impossible, and what job that room is actually doing. Start where most Finns actually start. Not at a lakeside, not in the snow, in a basement. The building is 9 stories and 41 apartments. Somewhere near the bicycle store and the drying room and the locked cages where people keep their winter tires, there is a door with a small round window and a wooden bench outside it. Behind the door, a shower room, and beyond that, 4 square meters of pine. The heater is bolted to the floor in the corner, packed with stones. The thermostat is fixed. There is a notice above it, and the notice says, "Do not adjust it," and nobody does. The hour belongs to somebody. That is the whole system. You book it on a sheet by the door, or now, more often on your phone. And for that hour, the room is yours. In many buildings, the heater will not even switch on unless the slot has been claimed, because a 15-kilowatt element left idling 2 hours a day costs the building over €1,000 a year, and the building is a company, and the residents are the shareholders. The woman from the third floor sits on her folded cloth. Everybody brings one. You do not sit on bare wood, and you do not throw water at the walls, because the walls are pine, and pine warps, and the next repair is paid for by all 41 apartments. She fills the ladle from a bucket and pours it over the stones. The sound is not a hiss. It is closer to a breath. The water flashes into vapor, the vapor hits the skin, and the room seems for a moment to get much hotter than the thermometer says. That vapor has its own word here, löily. It is the same word used for the spirit of the sauna, and Finns will argue about the quality of it, the way other countries argue about coffee. At 9, she leaves. She rinses the bench. She takes the wet cloth with her. The next name on the list is for 9 to 10, and she has never spoken to him. Look at what just happened. 41 households, most of whom do not know each other's names, share one small room, one heater, one bucket, one ladle, and a fixed weekly ration of heat. And they do it without a manager, a dispute, or a single face-to-face negotiation. That is not politeness. That is a machine. And understanding how it was built means going up the stairs and out into a street where nobody will look at you. Helsinki in February. 4 in the afternoon, and the light has already gone. The tram stop outside the station has 9 people waiting on it. They are spread along 30 meters of pavement like beads on a string, each one at the outer limit of the next one's comfort. Nobody is talking. Nobody looks unhappy. When the tram arrives, they board in the order they came without being asked, and they distribute themselves through the carriage on exactly the same principle. Window seats first, then aisle seats in empty rows. A double seat beside a stranger is the last thing taken, and it is taken with a small, apologetic nod. Visitors read this as coldness. It is a reasonable reading, and it is wrong. Finland has 5.5 million people spread over the 5th largest country in Western Europe. For most of its history, those people lived in small settlements, a long way apart, in a climate that punishes wasted effort. In that arrangement, talk is expensive. You are going to see the same 40 people for the rest of your life. Every unnecessary word is a word you cannot take back. So speech gets rationed. Not suppressed, rationed. Words are spent when they carry something. The effects are everywhere once you see them. A Finn will not say, "We should meet sometime," unless they mean to fix a date. If you are told a meeting starts at 2, you arrive at 2, and arriving at 10 past is not casual. It is a deduction from somebody else's afternoon. If you want to visit a friend's flat, you agree it in advance, even if that friend has known you for 20 years, because turning up at a door is a claim on time that has not been offered. And the silence itself is neutral. That is the part outsiders almost always get wrong. In a culture where speech means information, a pause does not mean you are being judged or excluded or disliked. It means there is nothing that needs saying yet. The system is efficient. It is also, if you leave it alone, a very good way to go an entire winter without touching another human being. Which is why the other room exists. The same man who moved down the carriage to avoid your elbow will be sitting against you in 4 hours with nothing on. Neither of you will think it's strange. To understand why, you have to go about 170 kilometers northwest to a hill above a lake, in a city built on a rapids. Tampere, the Pispala Ridge, a steep spine of wooden houses stacked between 2 lakes, built by people who worked in the cotton mills and the paper mills below. At the corner of the ridge, there is a low building with a brick chimney and a wooden door. There is a queue outside it, in the snow, and the queue is not for a restaurant. Hermani Latinen and his wife Maria open a bakery in the Rajaporti block. They open a food shop beside it, and behind both, because the mill workers on this hill have nowhere to wash, they open a sauna. The bakery is gone, the shop is gone, the sauna has not stopped. Rajaportin sauna is the oldest public sauna in Finland still in use. The first building was wood. The stone one you walk into now went up in 1915 and has barely changed since. The only alteration worth naming came in the 1930s when they put in a wall to separate the men's washroom from the women's. Here is what happens on the afternoon of a bathing day. The man who heats the sauna arrives hours before anybody is let in. The stove is masonry, and inside it sits stones weighing more than a ton. He splits and loads logs a meter long, not for atmosphere, but because that is the length the firebox takes, and nothing shorter will get a ton of rock to glow. Then he waits. When the wood has burned down and the stones are red, the fire goes out and water is thrown across them to clear what the smoke left behind. The flue is closed, the stove stops roaring and starts holding. That is the trick, and it is why a masonry stove is worth 6 hours of somebody's day. An electric heater gives you heat while it is switched on. A ton of stone gives you heat all evening, and the lowly changes as the night goes on. Harsh and dry at first, then softer, then thick and gentle by the last shift. Inside, there is one bench height, not 3, 1. Which means there is no better seat. Nobody is above anybody. A retired welder and a university lecturer sit on the same plank at the same distance from the stones, and neither of them knows or asks which is which, because both of them left everything that would tell you outside in a locker. This room was never designed as a pleasure. For most of the life of this country, the sauna was the cleanest place a family had, and so it was where the difficult things happened. Finnish women gave birth in them, on the benches, into the 20th century. The sauna was warm, it had water, and the smoke had kept it close to sterile. And when someone died, the body was carried out to the same room, washed there and dressed there before burial. You are born in it, and you are washed in it for the last time. That is not a metaphor anyone here invented afterwards. That is the building schedule of a Finnish life until about 100 years ago. Why this particular sauna is still burning when almost every other public sauna in the country closed is the harder question. We will come back to it. First, the reasons so many of them were built. Every custom in this country is answering the same two shortages: warmth and light. Everything else, what is eaten, when it is eaten, who is at the table, what happens at the door, what happens at 8 in the evening, falls out of those two. So take the day from the top. "7 in the morning in a flat in Turku. It is dark, and it will be dark when the children reach the school gate. There is a pan on the hob with oats in it, and water, and a pinch of salt. Puro, porridge. It has been on for 10 minutes, and it is nearly ready. It goes into bowls with a spoon of jam pressed into the middle, or a handful of frozen berries picked in August, and a splash of cold milk poured round the edge so the top stays hot. Beside it, on a board, rye bread. Dark, sour, dense enough to be heavy in the hand. Butter, a slice of cheese, and a carton of viili, a soured milk that comes out of the tub in one long stretch and alarms every visitor who meets it. Then coffee. Filter coffee, not much ceremony, and a great deal of it. Finns drink more of it per person than anybody else on earth. The whole meal is over in about 11 minutes. Nobody lingers. This is not a country that treats breakfast as an occasion. It treats it as fuel, loaded before a cold walk in the dark, and the load is designed to hold until the middle of the day. Because in Finland, the middle of the day is where the real meal is. "11:30. In an office block in Tampere, in a hospital in Oulu, in a technical college in Lahti, the same thing is happening at the same time. Lunus. Lunch. It works like this. Workplaces, universities, hospitals and public offices run a canteen. For one fixed price, commonly 10 to 15 euros, often less with a subsidy, you get a hot main course, a salad table you serve yourself from, rye bread and butter, and a glass of milk or water. Not a sandwich at a desk. A plate at a table, sitting down, between 11 and 1. That is the hot meal of the Finnish day. Which is why dinner in the evening is frequently a small thing, soup or bread and something on it, and why visitors who arrive expecting a large meal at 7 are often quietly baffled. And underneath the canteen sits a decision made a very long time ago. In 1948, Finland became the first country in the world to write a free hot school meal into law. Every child in comprehensive school, every school day, regardless of what their parents earn. No packed lunch, no lunch money, no queue of children who cannot pay. It was passed while the country was still paying war reparations and still rehousing hundreds of thousands of people from land it had lost. Think about what that does over 78 years. Every adult in this country grew up eating the same meal at the same time, in the same room as everybody else in their year, with no visible difference between the child of a surgeon and the child of a cleaner. The plate was identical. There was nothing to notice. That is the same design as the one bench in Pispala. Strip out the markers, and people who are not equals can still sit next to each other. You will see this pattern again and again here, and it is almost never announced. It is just built into the furniture. There is a bakery counter in the Turku Market Hall, selling something the rest of the world has mostly not heard of. A Karjalan pirakka is a boat of thin rye crust filled with rice porridge, crimped along both edges by hand, and eaten warm under a spoon of butter that has been mashed with chopped boiled egg. It comes from Karelia, much of which Finland no longer holds, and it is protected under European law, so only pies made the old way may carry the name. Further west in the archipelago, the bread turns dark and faintly sweet with malt and syrup. In Savonlinna, they fold pastry into a half moon and call it lörtsi. In Lappeenranta, a filled bun with ham and egg is called hydrogen, and the same bun with only egg is called atom, and nobody can tell you why. But go far enough north, and food stops being the interesting problem. Nuorgam is the northernmost village in Finland, at the top of Lapland, on the river that marks the Norwegian border. Sometime in late November, the sun sets there. It does not rise again for more than 50 days. 200 kilometers south, in Sodankylä, the same thing happens for about 16 days. In Rovaniemi, on the Arctic Circle, for 2. Even down in Helsinki, 1,000 kilometers from Nuorgam, the shortest day gives you around 6 hours of light, which means an office worker leaving at 5 in December has not seen the sun since the weekend. The Finnish word for this is kaamos. It is not the blackout people imagine. The sun sits just below the horizon and pushes a long, cold blue up into the sky in the middle of the day. Snow takes that blue and throws it back, so the landscape is lit from underneath, and everything reads as one color. Finns call it the blue moment, and photographers plan their year around it. It also does measurable damage. Around 85% of Finnish adults report that the change of season moves their mood. Kaamos depression is not slang here. It is a term clinicians use for a depressive pattern that arrives in the autumn and lifts in the spring. So there are countermeasures, and they are unromantic. Bright light lamps on desks and breakfast tables, switched on at 7 and left running for half an hour. Vitamin D in tablet form, taken by a large share of the population through the dark months, because skin this far north makes almost none of it between October and March. And for those who can afford it, a week somewhere with a sun in it, bought in January, treated as maintenance rather than holiday. But the lamp is not the answer to the dark. It is a supplement to the answer. What Finns actually do with 52 days of no sunrise is something else, and we will get to it, because it is the same thing they do with a Tuesday evening in a Helsinki basement. There is a rule at the front door of every home in this country, and breaking it is the fastest way a visitor announces they have not understood the place. The shoes come off, all of them, always. Inside the door, there is a mat, and beside the mat, a low rack, and on the rack, the household's outdoor boots stand in a row with their soles pointing out and their laces loose. Guests add theirs to the end. If the host has slippers, they are offered. If not, you go in socks, and nobody thinks about it again. This is not manners, it is arithmetic. For 6 to 8 months of the year, the ground outside is some combination of snow, meltwater, grit, and road salt. And road salt is the important one, because a city spreads tons of it, and it comes into a flat on the sole of a boot, and it destroys wooden floors. A Finnish home is also sealed tight and heated continuously from September to May. Whatever comes through that door stays in the air until spring. So the shoes stop at the mat. 9 months of the outside world are left in a meter of hallway. There is a second rule at the same door, quieter than the first. You are expected. Somebody agreed a time. Even between close friends, even between siblings, the visit was arranged. Not because Finns dislike company, but because unannounced company takes a decision away from the person inside. And once you are through, the reserve you met in the street is simply not there. The hospitality is direct and slightly relentless. You will be given coffee whether or not you asked. There will be something baked. You will be told to take more, and told again. And at some point in the evening, if it is that kind of house, somebody will get up and switch on the heater without discussing it, because it takes 40 minutes, and it is easier to start it now. Which brings us to the version of all this that Finns dream about in February. There are around 188,000 lakes in this country. On the edges of them stand roughly 500,000 registered summer cottages. The median one is 40 square meters or smaller, for a population of 5.5 million. Kuopio alone has over 10,000. Mikkeli, Savonlinna, Parainen and Lohja are not far behind. The word is mökki, and no translation carries what it means. Roughly half the country has access to one. Many families have held theirs for 3 or 4 generations, along with the furniture inside it, which is why so many mökki are furnished entirely in the taste of somebody's grandmother. The households that do not inherit one rent. The market runs Saturday to Saturday through June, July, and August, and a basic cabin for 4 to 6 people, outdoor toilet, wood-fired sauna on the shore, no frills, costs somewhere between 500 and 1,400 euros for the week. Booked 4 to 6 months out because the good July dates go early. And a Finnish family will take 4 to 6 consecutive weeks at one, not a fortnight, half the summer. The classic arrangement is 4 things and nothing else. A small wooden cabin, a separate sauna building on the shore, a rowing boat on a wooden dock, and an outhouse. Many have no mains water. Some have no mains electricity. Water comes out of a well or straight out of the lake in a bucket. Which means the sauna is not the luxury item on that list. The sauna is the bathroom. If the fire is not lit by late afternoon, nobody in that family washes that night. Not the children, not the grandmother, not the man who has spent the day cutting next winter's wood. The whole household's hygiene sits on one person, remembering to carry an armful of birch down to the shore at 4 o'clock. That is what the practice is for. Everything else about it, the quiet, the pouring, the swim, grew on top of a bathroom. The sequence is fixed, and nobody wrote it down. You heat it. You wash first, properly before you go in. The sauna is not where you get clean, it is where you get hot. Then you sit. 20 minutes, maybe less, until you have stopped noticing your own thoughts. Then you go out and into the lake. In August, that is a pleasure. In February, somebody has cut a hole in the ice with a saw and screwed a ladder to the edge of it, and the water under the ice is 1 degree above freezing, and people go down the ladder anyway, in the dark, without much comment. They come back up, walk to the sauna, and start again. 2 rounds, 3. The gap between rounds is when the talking happens, sitting outside in a towel in a temperature that would be a news story anywhere else. Somewhere in this, there will be a vita, a bundle of young birch branches bound at the stem, soaked in warm water until the leaves go soft, then beaten lightly against the shoulders and the back. It smells like a wet forest. It stings pleasantly. It also, as it happens, brings blood to the skin. You cut it from your own trees, never from the neighbors, even though the law here would technically let you walk across the neighbor's land, swim off their shore, and pick their berries, because every man's right gives every person in Finland the run of uncultivated ground, regardless of who holds the title. That is the shape of the thing. A country that hands you legal access to almost everybody's land, and a social code that means you would never dream of taking a branch from it. The rights are collective. The restraint is personal. Neither works without the other. And the oldest version of the room is the one that has almost no equipment in it at all. In Kuopio, there is a smoke sauna that seats over 100 people, the largest in the world, built for the men who used to float timber down the lakes. A savu sauna has no chimney. You build a fire under a heap of stones inside a closed wooden room, and you let it burn for 6 or 7 hours, and the smoke fills the space and blackens every surface and coats the walls in soot that will never come off. Then you put the fire out. You open the door and the hatch and let the smoke pull itself out of the building. You wipe down the benches, and what is left is a room lined in black, holding heat in a mass of stone, with the softest and heaviest lowly anybody here can produce. Most Finns will tell you it is the best there is. Almost nobody has the 7 hours. It was also, for centuries, a fire hazard that repeatedly took whole towns with it. The 1720s. The authorities banned the building of chimneyless huts and saunas inside Finnish towns. Wooden cities, packed tight, with an open fire in a windowless wooden box behind every third house. The arithmetic was not survivable. The people of Helsinki comply badly. They keep building them in the yards, because a ban does not change the fact that a family with no other way to get warm and clean will take the risk. Doctors of the period, meanwhile, are recommending the sauna as treatment for a long list of complaints, which does not help enforcement. So, the room persisted through a ban, through fires, through poverty, and it kept doing the thing it had always done, which is the thing this whole film is circling. There is a sauna inside the Finnish Parliament building, not a spa, a working room with benches where elected members of opposing parties have argued for decades with no clothes on. Two presidents used the same instrument abroad. Urho Kekkonen and Martti Ahtisaari both conducted negotiations in a sauna. Ahtisaari later as an internationally recognized mediator, and the practice acquired a name: sauna diplomacy. This sounds like a national eccentricity. It is closer to a tool. Here is what the room removes: the suit, the watch, the shoes that cost more than the other man's, the phone, any badge of rank, service, wealth, or department. You cannot check somebody's status in there because there is nothing left on them to check. And it removes the physical distance that governs every other Finnish interaction. On the tram, the arm's length is compulsory. On a 2-meter bench with 6 people on it, it is impossible. So the two rules that look contradictory turn out to be a pair. Outside, contact is rationed to almost nothing, because a small population living close together for a lifetime cannot afford friction. Inside, for 1 booked hour, the rationing is suspended entirely. No rank, no clothes, no distance, no small talk, and no consequence attached to whatever gets said. You do not get one without the other. The reserve is only bearable because the release exists. The release is only safe because everybody outside it is so careful. That is the machine. It has been running for a very long time. And in the middle of the 20th century, this country very nearly threw it away. The world files the Finnish sauna under heritage, something old, carefully kept, handed down intact. That is not what happened. Finland almost got rid of it, on purpose, and the reason was not neglect. It was success. Go back to the late 1940s. The war has ended. The country is paying reparations and rehousing more than 400,000 people from territory it has lost. Housing is desperately short, and what exists is old. This is the peak of the public sauna. In the cities, most working people do not have a bathroom. They have a shared cold tap in a stairwell, and once or twice a week, they walk to a building like Rajaporti, pay a small fee, and get clean. The queues were long. A sauna might be heated for 7 hours before the first person got through the door. Then the country solved the problem. Through the 50s and 60s, Finland built suburbs at speed, and the new flats had something the old ones did not: a bathroom of your own. Hot water on a tap. A door you could close. Public swimming halls went up with sauna departments attached. New apartment blocks were fitted with a shared electric sauna in the basement, on a booking list. The machine in the basement is itself a product of this era. Later, private saunas inside individual flats became a selling point in their own right. And a public sauna stopped meaning community. It started meaning poverty. If you were seen going to one, the assumption was that you could not afford a bathroom. That is the part nobody puts on the tourist material. Within a generation, the room that had been the shared property of an entire working district became a mark of what you had failed to acquire. They closed, not in a wave, one at a time, quietly, as the neighborhood around each one moved up. In the cities, the old public saunas had almost entirely gone after the 50s. By the 1980s, they were close to extinct. Rajaporti survived, and it survived for an unglamorous reason. Pispala was a hill of small wooden houses built by mill workers, and it stayed poor long after the districts below it did not. The plumbing arrived late. The people who needed the sauna kept needing it. Then, in 1965, the city of Tampere expropriated the block, partly to widen a street, partly because somebody understood what was in it. The building came into public hands, and a local sauna association took over the running of it. Volunteers, a small entrance fee, a coffee room next door. It is still lit by wood, by hand, by somebody who arrives in the afternoon with an axe. Not everywhere had that. In Helsinki, when anybody finally thought to count what was left of the city's public saunas, the number was in single figures. Kotiharju in Kallio was one of the last standing. Built in 1928 in a district of small flats built for factory workers, it is the only wood-heated public sauna the capital did not lose. And here is what that decline actually cost, in a form you can measure. Look at a new apartment being finished in Helsinki right now. In the 80s and 90s, a private sauna was the thing that sold a flat. Today, fewer new apartments are built with one. Roughly a third of one major landlord's rental homes have a sauna at all. The reason is arithmetic again. A square meter of housing in central Helsinki runs at around 23 euros a month. In Oulu, the same square meter is 14. A one-bedroom flat in the middle of the capital is between 1,000 and 1,300 euros a month, and 4 square meters of pine is 4 square meters you are not sleeping in. So the room gets cut, first from the flat. Then, in some buildings, the shared one in the basement gets metered, then charged for, then booked less, then heated less. And a household that has always had somewhere to be hot in the dark discovers that the hour is now a line item. Not lost, priced. Which is the moment the thing turned around. Because remember the question left hanging up in Lapland. What do you actually do with 52 days without a sunrise? You do not fix it with a lamp. A lamp is 30 minutes of imitation daylight at a kitchen table, alone. What Finns do is book an hour. They arrange to be hot, in a small room, with other people, on a fixed day of the week, whether or not anybody feels like it. And then they go outside into the cold and come back in. And the body responds to that the way bodies do. The dark is not solved by light. It is solved by heat and by a scheduled reason to be in a room with somebody, which is exactly what stopped being available when the public saunas closed, and exactly what the country started rebuilding in the 2010s. Along the Helsinki waterfront, new sauna buildings began going up, architecture magazine buildings with steps down into the Baltic. In Merihaka, an architect and an artist built a small public sauna where phones are switched off at the door and conversation drops to a whisper. Off the market square, a 10-minute ferry gets you to an old smoke sauna on an island. Ice swimming, which had been a minority pursuit for the very hardy, turned into something ordinary people did on a Wednesday. New public saunas started opening outside the capital region too, where there is no tourist to explain them. And once a year, something happens that would be unthinkable in most of Europe. On Sauna Day, ordinary Finns open their own private saunas, the one in the flat, the one at the cottage, the one in the yard, and let strangers walk in and use them. No charge, no vetting. You look at a map, you pick a household, you knock, and somebody you have never met hands you a bucket. A country that requires you to arrange a visit to your own sister 3 days in advance holds an annual event where the front door comes off the hinges entirely. The rest of it is stranger still. There are saunas built into vans and trailers that tour the country as a festival. There is one inside a cabin on a Ferris wheel above the Helsinki harbour. There are floating saunas on rafts, saunas on gondolas at ski resorts, a sauna in a converted tram. None of that is done for visitors. It is done because if a Finn is going to be somewhere for more than a few hours, somebody will eventually ask the obvious question about whether there is heat. But the building that says the most about this country was not designed, funded, or approved by anybody. East of Helsinki city centre, past the cranes, there is a strip of old dockland called Saunas. For years it was a boatyard, and then it was nothing. A flat, wind-scoured spit of gravel and broken concrete at the edge of the harbour, with the city's newest district being poured a few hundred metres away. In 2011, a few friends found a sauna stove there, abandoned. Somebody had thrown it out. They did not apply for anything. They did not own the land. They built a shed around the stove out of whatever the yard had left lying on it, lit a fire in it, and got in. Other people came. Some of them brought timber. The shed got better. Then there were two of them. Sauna has now been running for 15 years, and every single thing about it should not work. It is free, not cheap, free. There is no till, no card reader, no membership, no booking. It is open 24 hours a day, every day of the year. There is no closing time because there is nothing to close. There is no staff, not one paid person, no receptionist, no attendant, no manager, no security. There are no lockers. You put your clothes on a bench and you walk away from them. There is no lifeguard. You climb down a ladder into the Baltic, in a country where the sea freezes, entirely at your own risk, and a sign tells you so. And there is no wood delivery. That is the part that matters, and it is the part that explains everything else. The saunas are wood-fired, which means that if the fire is not lit, the sauna is cold, and there is nobody whose job it is to light it. So the chain works backwards, and it works like this. Somebody splits the logs because the axe is there and the pile was low. Somebody carries them in. Somebody builds the fire and waits the 40 minutes it takes, and during those 40 minutes, they get nothing. The heat only arrives for whoever is there later. Somebody sweeps the bench when they leave. Somebody banks what is left of the fire so it is still alive for the next person through the door. None of these people are the same person. None of them will meet. There is no rota, no sign-up sheet, no one keeping score. Every single one of them is doing unpaid work for a stranger they will never identify. And the entire structure stands or falls on whether the next person through that door turns out to be decent. They are. On any given evening, the benches hold whoever turned up. Construction workers off the site next door, students, a couple in their 70s who have been coming since it was one shed. Somebody who arrived in Finland 8 months ago and does not speak the language yet. Tourists who read about it somewhere. Nurses off a late shift. There is no clothing rule and most people wear nothing, and it is worth being precise about what that is and is not. There is nothing sexual in that room, and there is no ambiguity about it. Any suggestion otherwise is regarded here as genuinely tasteless. A category error, the way telling a joke at a funeral is a category error. What nakedness does in that room is delete information. On a bench at Sauna, there is no way to tell who owns a flat and who is on a waiting list for one. No watch, no coat, no job title, no accent visible until somebody speaks, and often nobody does. So they sit, shoulder to shoulder, strangers, in the heat, in the dark, in the middle of a winter that has not shown them the sun in a month. Somebody pours water on the stones without asking, because at Sauna anybody may. And then they go outside and get into the sea. In winter, somebody has cut a hole in the ice, cut it personally with a saw, for free, for the general use of anybody who shows up. There is a ladder bolted to the edge. Below it, black water at 1 degree. You go down it. Your body registers this as an emergency. Then you come out, and for about 4 minutes afterwards, there is nothing in your head at all. Then back into the heat, then out again, and in between, sitting on a wet step in a towel at -15, people talk to each other in a way that they will not do on a tram, in an office, or at a bus stop for the rest of the week. That is the whole point of the country, standing in one place with the roof falling in. It is also not safe. Not the swimming, the existence of it. Sauna has no owner, no permit history, no insurance, and no legal claim to the ground it stands on. It has been taken apart. It has burned. Each time, volunteers rebuilt it, and each time the city looked at a structure it had never authorized on land it was in the middle of developing, and let it stand. A district of new apartment blocks is rising around it now. Nobody can tell you with certainty what happens next. But look at what 15 years of it has proved. Here is a nation that will not sit beside you on a half-empty tram, that will not knock on a friend's door without arranging it first, that treats an unnecessary sentence as a small imposition and personal space as something close to a right. And it maintains for free, with no supervision of any kind, an unlocked wooden room on stolen ground where anybody at all may walk in at 3 in the morning, take their clothes off, and sit down next to a stranger. The reserve was never the opposite of that. The reserve is what pays for it. Every arm's length at the bus stop, every silence left unfilled, every visit agreed in advance, every hour written in pencil on a list beside a basement door, all of it is the same discipline. You do not take what has not been offered. You do not spend what you have not earned. You leave the room as you found it, or better, for somebody whose name you will never know. Run that discipline for a few hundred years, and you get a country where you can leave your wallet on a bench in the dark and go swimming. That is what the heat is for, not wellness, not tradition. It is the 1 hour in the week when a people who ration everything spend all of it at once on whoever happens to be sitting there. Back in the basement, it is 5 to 9. The woman from the 3rd floor has gone up with her wet cloth and her towel. The bench has been rinsed. The bucket has been refilled and set back beside the heater with the ladle laid across it, handle out, the way you would hand somebody a tool. The stones are still working. Whoever booked 9 to 10 will not need to wait for anything. He comes down at 2 minutes to. He does not know her name. He has passed her in the stairwell perhaps 30 times in 4 years, and they have exchanged a nod on most of those occasions and nothing else on any of them. He will find the room hot, clean, and ready. He will leave it hot, clean, and ready. Neither of them will ever mention it to the other. That is the arrangement. 41 households, 1 small room, no manager, no argument. A list on a wall in pencil where anybody could cross out anybody's hour and nobody ever has.
It nearly went.
That is the thing worth holding on to. For 30 or 40 years, this country was quietly embarrassed by the public sauna. It was what you used if you had failed to get a bathroom. The old ones closed one by one, and in the capital, the survivors could be counted on one hand. What brought it back was not policy and not nostalgia. It was a handful of specific people doing specific things. A sauna association in Pispala taking on a wood-fired building the city had bought and turning up to heat it by hand week after week for decades. An architect and an artist putting a small public sauna on the Helsinki shoreline and making the rule at the door that phones go off. A few friends on a derelict boatyard who found a stove somebody had thrown out. And on the 17th of December 2020, UNESCO added Finnish sauna culture to its list of the intangible heritage of humanity. Not the buildings, which are mostly unremarkable, but the practice, the lowly, the passing of it down inside families, the sauna clubs, the fact that in this country, no version of it outranks another. New ones are still opening, and not only where tourists go. None of that guarantees anything. The flats are still being built without them. The square meter in Helsinki is still too expensive. The stove at Sompasari still sits on ground somebody else owns, with cranes closing in. But there is a detail at that place that I keep coming back to. The wood. Nobody is paid to cut it. Nobody checks whether you did. If you arrive and the pile is low, you can walk into a hot sauna that somebody else lit, sit down, enjoy every minute of it, leave, and be no worse off. And people cut it anyway, in the dark, in February, for a person they will not meet, who will never know their name, who will sit in the heat they made and assume correctly that this is simply how the room works. Somewhere in Finland tonight, somebody is stacking that wood. Somewhere else, a family is carrying birch down to a shore in the last of the light, because if the fire is not lit by dusk, then nobody washes. Somewhere else, 11 names are written on a list beside a basement door, and one of them is yours for an hour. You would be welcome in any of them. That is not a figure of speech, it is the actual rule, and it has been for a very long time. You would just have to take your shoes off, keep your voice down, sit on your own cloth, and leave the bench the way you found it. Thank you for watching. If you would like to keep traveling with us, subscribe, and we will see you on the next journey.